Good morning, everyone out there in internet land. This is, I think it's a Tuesday. It's a Tuesday in May, and aren't we all happy that it's May and April showers brought May flowers, except in Binghamton where it just keeps raining. I think there's a little sun out today, and we're going to go out with the dog and enjoy it, but then it's going to rain again. This is Yvonne DeVita. You're watching Smart Conversation. And I have a really, really special guest today, Melanie Hicks, Dr. Melanie Hicks. Welcome, Melanie, to the show.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
You know, everyone, do you ever aspire to climb a mountain, a real mountain? I mean, we climb mountains every day, it seems to me, just to get over the one thing or another. But what about real mountains? What about a real hike up a mountain? We're going to talk to Melanie about that. But first, let me tell you a little bit more about her. Dr. Melanie Hicks is education and career consultant with more than 2 decades of experience. So she started when she was a teenager, apparently. Writing her first book, which is unpublished, at 10 years old. She has now been published in numerous magazines and online publications, including but not limited to Forbes, Authority magazine, Marie Claire magazine. I don't know this other one, Mock Idasia, a grassroots policy manual for lawmakers in Bosnia, funded by the U.S. Department of State. Wow. She holds a doctorate of public policy from Florida State University, and she's won numerous awards for writing and public service. And we're going to talk a little bit during our time today about her book, Incongruent. So, Melanie, I'm just like over the moon here because you actually went up a mountain, a real mountain. Talk about that a little bit. Why and what was the experience like?
So I, with a group of friends, actually, we trekked the 16-day trek to Everest Base Camp. And then there's a little bit more to the story at the end. But it was really just kind of a culmination at the end of, for me, kind of a year-long journey of trying to find meaning for my own life, trying to find meaning in my own career, and trying to do the things that made me fearful. So I'll start a little bit before that by saying the Everest trek was only my second overnight hike of my life. I decided around age 36 that I was going to make a bucket list of everything I wanted to accomplish before age 40. And so I made this, I remember I was at a concert with a friend in Washington, D.C., and she was turning 40. She's a few years older than me. She was turning 40, and she mentioned that she had a semi bucket list in her head and how many of those she had checked off. And I said, what a great idea. I'm going to do this. I'm going to make this list. And so one of the things on there was do a long overnight trek. Uh-huh. And so when it came close to my 40th birthday, I decided I wanted to trek to Machu Picchu. You can also take a train to Machu Picchu. So my fear level was a little bit down. How hard could a trek be? How hard could the Inca Trail be if people can also just get on a train and go up in sandals? Right. So it was a 4-day overnight. I didn't have a significant other, and none of my friends really, the timing didn't work out. So I just signed myself up and flew to Peru. It was myself and 10 strangers from Europe. Actually, there were no other Americans in the crew. And it was a four night, 5-day trek down through the Inca Trail. You kind of go up and down through the mountains. Inca Trail is actually in a valley, but and so that experience, it was not the first time that I had traveled internationally alone. And certainly not, I'd done lots of domestic travel alone, a couple of international trips. I say alone, I always join up with a group, but I, just plan it by myself. I fly over there, meet up with strangers and sort of experience whatever is planned. But so those things had happened before, but never kind of hiking or camping or trekking. And it was really wonderful. It was through a guided tour. So they carried the tents for us. We just had to carry our own, basic supplies and our own clothes. And that was really nice. And they cooked for us. So it was very much glamping, but it was a great experience of both getting past a fear of kind of this unknown. What is it like to trek up and down mountains for 4 days and spend the night in a tent and do all these things? And, you know, I just decided from there that whatever, if I could do that, then, you know, whatever else came up, that I can say yes, and I'll just figure it out. And, you know, what's the worst that can happen?
Yeah. Wow. So I'm really interested in the story of how long did it take? You know, what were you thinking while you were there? How I mean, it's a whole different, even though you called it glamping in a way, it's certainly not your regular life here in America. It's,
Right.
you know, so how long was the trip? How long was the hike?
So the actual hike was 5 days and 4 nights. But I stayed a few extra days on each end to just experience Peru. So I was by myself for those days, just kind of being a tourist, wandering around the city, trying to engage with some of the culture, meet people, talk to people. I like to people watch, so I like to just watch people. And I did a lot of journaling and even a video journal of the trip, just to be able to kind of remember some of those pieces.
Sure.
I remember in 2015, so this was prior to that, I went to India with a group, and I had blogged all about it. And then the blog site shut down and I lost all of my notes. So it was pretty dramatic for me, because I had these wonderful, like, detailed descriptions of my trip to India and this great engagement we had with a lot of really cool and local and cultural experiences. And so this time I kept it all in an actual written journal and some videos on my phone. And you know, the experience was all of that. It was sometimes in your head. Some of the peaks were really steep. The weather changed from freezing cold to burning hot in a single day, just as kind of any trekking, any kind of mountain climate tends to do. And this was just all new. I was kind of wide-eyed and ready to experience. It's very open, and I made space to experience all there was, but also there was certainly some fear, just a little bit of loneliness, because everyone else on the trip was in pairs. There was a father-daughter, there was a couple of married couples. I was the only kind of solo person, but they were very welcoming. I mean, I got to know them. We had a lot of laughs. We talked a lot about kind of America versus the UK, which is where most of them are from. And there were a couple from Australia, and it was just a really wonderful overall experience.
Yeah, kind of, what did you learn? What learn in the sense of, I like to think about human beings as always, we don't do it, but we should always be learning something. We should always be exploring ourselves and the world around us. And it seems like a trek like that would be open for something like that.
Yes. And actually, you know, it reinforced something that happened to me by happenstance in 2016. So I was scheduled to go on a yoga retreat to Corsica, a little island between France and Italy. And my flights, all of them consecutively, were delayed. And I landed in Paris. I couldn't get a connecting flight to Corsica, to the island. It's a little puddle jumper. There's only a few. And we landed so late in Paris because that flight was delayed, that I had to spend the night in Paris. I had no luggage. So I and I did not smartly pack my carry-on, as I now always do. But so I literally went to a store and bought a dress and shoes. I went to a lingerie store and bought undergarments. I went to a pharmacy and bought makeup and basic toiletries. And I ended up, through the magic of Facebook, figuring out that I had a friend that was in Paris for a week. And so we met out at, of all things, an Irish bar in Paris, and spent this crazy evening just talking. And she's she's a fellow kind of creative. She's an artist. She has now her own entrepreneurial endeavor called Palette Champagne. She's wonderful. And we just had this wonderful conversation and got to know each other even better. We kind of only knew each other peripherally through our professional connections. So this was a great time. And then the next morning I flew out. I landed in Corsica. My luggage still was not there. And so
Oh,
everyone on the retreat, so I had to buy one more item, of course, because of beach. So I bought a bathing suit and a cover up, and a pair of flip-flops. And the rest of the week, my luggage never came. And so everyone on the trip would just dress me. Who's dressing Melanie today? Who's,
oh,
sometimes like this outfit's not quite too big. Who has a scarf that can be used as a belt? What can, it was just, and that trip taught me. My luggage actually arrived the day, like an hour before I was flying from there to Germany. So the entire week, the entire 7 days, I had no luggage other than the outfit I came from America in, the outfit I bought in Paris, and this bathing suit. And everyone on the trip it was a really humbling experience to both have to ask for help, right? I mean, there wasn't even a place for me to buy a lot of clothes, even if I wanted to be super self-sufficient, right? But there was also no reason for me to, right? And so it was this forced lesson of, be okay to ask for help and enjoy the moment, and whatever that looks like. It's not going to necessarily look like the way you envisioned it in your head. As with any good traveler, I probably spent weeks planning out every outfit I would wear in beautiful Corsica and got to wear none of them. Right. But that was perfectly fine, because wearing having other people just kind of dress me and say, like, this will look great on you. Try this, wear this. I had one person's earrings on and another person's dress and somebody else's shoes. And it was kind of wonderful and freeing. And it also reminded me how little that you really need to truly enjoy an experience if you just allow yourself to not take yourself too seriously, to let your inhibitions down and just go with the flow. And it didn't by any stretch of the imagination ruin the trip. In fact, it made it even better. And I think I took those lessons of kind of just go with the flow to this attitude of the treks to both Inca Trail and eventually the Everest Base Camp trek, which is, prepare as best you can, but know that you cannot prepare for all that will happen. And by proxy of that, you will only enjoy the experience if you allow yourself to. And if you get worked up in the details of how you perceived it was going to be, then you're always going to be trapped in disappointment.
That's a really, really big message right there. I think that we spend so much time, especially entrepreneurs, for instance. So they have this great big idea and they're going to start this business and it's going to be so successful and this is going to happen and this is going to happen. And sometimes they just need to sit back and listen, observe, and not always be got to do this, it's got to be this way, it's got to be that way. My husband and I talk about that all the time. Like yesterday, I don't remember exactly what he was doing. He was helping me in the kitchen. I said, that's perfect. And he said, nothing is perfect. Why? And he laughed at me. He says, we don't talk that way. It's not perfect and it's okay. It doesn't need to be perfect. Said, right. So this kind of leads into this book. I do want to talk. First of all, you wrote a book when you were 10 years old.
I did.
So I wrote a book when I was 12. And tell me about your book.
So this book was written on I had the joy of two parents that were dedicated to travel. And so my dad was a police officer. He would save up all his overtime and comp time. My mom was a teacher, so she had summers off. We had a very large RV and we would get in it at the beginning of summer and we would travel for 4 to 6 weeks in this RV in different paths around the country, very carefully planned by my very carefully planning father and very also spontaneous balls of yarn on the side of the road by my spontaneous mother. And so we would just travel around, always domestically, obviously. And in my childhood, they have now seen, I think, every state, but in my childhood, before I went away to college, I think we saw 45 or 46 states, all in total over the summers. And so on this particular trip, we were in 5 provinces of Canada. So on this particular trip, we're up in Canada and we're at some little town. And I was always a reader, avid reader. So I was reading all of the tourist kind of the placards and things that you read about the town. And somewhere in there, they talked about a mine, that this was an old mining town and that it used to be really famous and that the mine had closed. And so the book, and I also, there was, we went on some of these adventures with another couple, good friends of my parents. They brought their granddaughter. She was a couple years younger than me, but the two of us kind of palled around. And so I decided I was going to write a story about these mines. And so the book is basically, I think a 10 or 12 chapter book. I mean, each chapter is like 2 pages handwritten, right? But about these miners and what they went through, and the mine collapsed on them, and then kind of what they went through inside the mine. And then they eventually passed away, and their ghost would do nice things for the town. Like instead of being scary ghosts, they were like happy ghosts, right? That would bring presents to children in town, or do little deeds, goodwill deeds in the town, because the town kind of loved them or whatever. But at the end, it's really funny. The last chapter is, I think I had some version of a marketer in me, because the last chapter is basically a marketing brochure about how people should come visit the town because it's so beautiful and so nice. And, check out visitor center. It's so totally off message, but really funny.
Wow.
I was like somewhere in there at 10 years old, I thought I was going to be a marketing major.
Wow, that's really,
it closes as a marketing brochure. So
how interesting. Yes. Yeah. So look at it where you are now, and all the things that have happened. But I mean, the experiences you had as a child, being able to travel and do all of those things, that really sounds wonderful. I never went anywhere as a child, but my book was also about a ghost.
Oh, really?
It was about a woman who falls in love with a ghost that lives in her house, and it was just, I don't know. I don't have it anymore. I don't even remember the title, but it was just me pouring out my feelings, I guess. But this kind of builds up and leads to you as an adult and the things that you've gone through. And so your book, I do want to talk about Incongruent, and you have this wonderful book trailer on your site, so we will share that with everyone and let them know where they can go and see that, because it talks about why you wrote the book. Right. Tell us about that.
So at some point, there's kind of a number of life circumstances that all culminated into kind of this perfect storm of, real light bulb moment. But I realized that I have done a lot of things in my life that were really close to what I call my dharma, or my purpose, the sweet spot of exactly where you're supposed to be. I call it dharma adjacent. I chose, because I come from kind of risk averse upbringings and risk averse family, and I chose a major that was kind of slightly outside, a safer route to a more profitable job than the riskier, artsier major I might have chosen. And then my first job, and I just sort of started to watch as my career, and also kind of my life and these life decisions I was making. I always knew in my gut, I mean, I have a very strong connection to my gut, but I'm also extremely good at ignoring it when I want to, let my head overpower, and the fear factors in my head overpower that gut feeling. And so I kept making these decisions over and over again about my career, about my, life, about just whatever, that, missing out on opportunities, all based around fear. And once I figured that out, that I was sort of just slightly off. It wasn't like I went down some super bad path, or, did anything, extremely, insane, but it was more like I just wasn't quite there. I wasn't quite in this spot. And so I was always chasing something. I was never really going to settle and just be happy and be the full version of myself and give the most that I can give to the world, because there was always something wrong. I use the analogy of the Princess and the Pea a lot. In that mythical fairy tale, there's a rock under her mattress, and she doesn't, rather than lift the mattress up and get it out, she continues to pile mattresses on top of it and hope that she can't feel it anymore, instead of like getting down to the root of the problem and actually extracting the little rock or little pea or whatever. And I feel like that's kind of where I was going. It was always going to be there until I dug it out and figured out, the path I was really supposed to be on. And so I came to that, kind of realization of what I wanted to do. And then the first step was because I was always been a reader and a writer, I needed to get it out on paper, to kind of articulate it myself. And then what I feel like is my calling is to help other people find that. Where are the rocks under your mattress? Where are those places where you feel like you're almost in your sweet spot, but not quite. And how can we get you there? And I talk about in the trailer and in most of my speaking about being a flashlight and a mirror. And the flashlight is to just help you see what is possible, what is ahead of you, what can be, and the mirror to reflect back, to give you the courage to know you already have it inside you. It wouldn't be your path if it wasn't already designed to be where you're supposed to go. You just have to see that it's in there and be brave enough to take the steps to get there. And it sometimes means hard decisions, and they don't all have to be giant. They can be tiny steps that move you in that direction. But it's a resolve to say, this is truly what my purpose is, and it's okay. So some of this was inspired by a book by Stephen Cope, called The Great Work of Your Life. And I had read this book twice before at different times, and never really, it had been meaningful, but I hadn't really grasped it in the same way. And I read it this third time, and it was like this moment where I went, oh my gosh, this is me. And particularly it was his description of one of the characters in the book. The book is really stories about a lot of different people, from common people to famous people, and all like either in their dharma or not in their dharma, and kind of and talking about the relationship to those things. And there was one, and I'm going to get all the names wrong, but he was a pastor. He was bright and charismatic, and he rose up through the ranks of the church, and he got to the highest position, but he was miserable. And he hated Sunday sermons, and he hated doing his job, because what he really loved was music. And everyone told him that's a step down. If you go be a music director, you're taking a step backwards in your career. And so for a number of years, he kind of toiled away, knowing that this really wasn't his calling to be this minister. And then he wasn't giving everything he could be given. And so one day he just said, I'm going to be brave enough to go and take this choral position. And he ended up being this, not only was he brilliant at it and passionate and all of that, like stuff that he had inside of him, right? All that energy and flow went into it, but it then manifests itself out in like huge ways, right? Because if you really love what you're doing and you're really in your sweet spot, it just grows. And for him, he ended up being an international choral director. He inspired people across the world with his ability to lead choirs. They toured Europe. They did all of these things that no one expected to come of it, just by him. He took a step backwards to take a leap forward in where he was really supposed to be. And so I use that as inspiration. That was really something, that stuck with me, where I said, I can't allow fear to make me stay in this little box that is created, when yes, it might be against, the whole idea of incongruent. It might be a kind of against the grain of society or expectations of my parents or colleagues or mentors or society as a whole, to take a step backwards. But if you know that you're taking a step backwards specifically to get into your flow, the leap forward will just be astounding.
Well, I love that. I really loved the video in the description of the book. The book is not out yet, folks, but it will be coming soon.
Yes.
And I think one of the things that really impressed me, and as we talk even more so impresses me, is that I feel like you can talk to the everyday person who wants to make that change but is afraid and doesn't have. So it seems to me, and I must go on a limb here, I've been to a few conferences and I watched 10 webinars and whatnot, and the person presenting, spends 10 minutes talking about how they almost died, or they fell off a cliff, or they had this, they were addicted to something and had to get over it and whatnot. And I lately have come away feeling like, well, I've never had those problems. So am I not going to ever be a success? Do I have to go out and become an alcoholic or something? Because I think there's so many average people who just have what you described, and not this mountain they have to climb. It's a different mountain, right?
Right. No, I actually describe in the proposal I put together to just sort of help. It was really as much for me to help organize, as I was, as a writer, just trying to get organized, the outline of the book. I describe it as, it's not coming from a place of trauma. It's not, there was no dramatic impetus to this. It was tiny nugget of like a tiny inkling that just kept you up at night, like something that just kind of kept, like, would not stop bothering me, right? The little nip at your heel that you can't ignore. And eventually you have to address it. My husband describes scenarios, really usually when we're talking about kind of toxic scenarios, but as snake bites. So one little snake bite is not going to kill you. 10 may not kill you, but eventually, if you allow the snake bites to continue, they will take you down, right? The venom from, enough snake bites will bring you down. And I think about this as it relates to kind of being not in the career path or the life path that you really are meant to be in. Each individual little incident may bring you a little bit of unhappiness or a little bit of disgruntled, but a lifetime of those will make you very unhappy, bitter, kind of angry person, or at minimum just sad, right? I mean, like there's bitter, angry, or there's just kind of sad and depressed. And so you can ignore the fact that these are separate little incidents, or you can see them as like a trend and say, okay, this has to be addressed. And so I think that it's the change version for the everyday person. We don't, there are plenty of people who've been through horrific trauma, and I don't take anything away from their healing, but there's also those of us who have kind of filled all the boxes and look fine on paper.
Right.
But somewhere inside us, there's still a longing. Right. There's still a sense of lack of purpose.
Yeah, especially women, they're told from a very young age what they should be. You be a teacher, you can be a nurse, you can be this, you can be that. Even when you say, oh, yes, you can be president, nobody really supports that. You go to school and they want you to be a nurse or a teacher or a whatever. And not to denigrate nurses and teachers, by the way, God bless them. But even when you do that, this is the point, is there this little thing saying to you, well, this was not my choice. I did not want to do this. Why am I doing this? And can I do something else? Because I can remember, it's time to wrap up, but this is so fascinating. I can remember my ex-husband. So for instance, I decided when the children got in school to go back and study journalism. And he was furious. He was just furious. Why would I want to be a writer and I'd never make any money and I should become a nurse? Because a nurse would make enough money to enable him to buy a boat. And it was like, no. And shortly after that, we got divorced because it was like, no, I want to do this. I've always wanted to do this. And now I have the opportunity, I'm going to. So I cannot thank you enough for that message. That is such a powerful message. And so we are at the end. How can people find you, get a hold of you? What is the best way that you want people to connect with you?
Sure. So you can reach my website at www.melaniehicks.org. Or you can follow me on any of the social media. I am at In Pursuit Mel Sue. Okay,
so I will put all of that in written and in the links in the blog to the social media channels. And Melanie, this has really been fantastic. I knew it would be. And I'm so happy that we got to meet. And my dog is going to interrupt us now. So it's all right, Emily, in a minute. I want to stay in touch, and I can't wait for your book to come out.
Oh, thank you so much. This has been so fun. Thank you for just a venue to share more of my story. And you brought out interesting parts I haven't talked about in a long time as well. So I really appreciate that.
Excellent. Okay, so we will all see you next week or the week after when we do another Smart Conversations. But this one, I hope that you're going to keep and share and look at again and again. Melanie, have a great day.
Thanks so much.